In 1965, your dad was taking your mother on dates to do things like see Huey Newton talk.
Correct.
And 6 or 7 years later, he was already under indictment for being what the federal government called the largest drug conspiracy in the entire Midwest,
Yes.
including Chicago and everywhere. And what changed in America, and we were talking about thinking that maybe Richard Nixon and many academics think he's implemented an idea of black capitalism to take the legs out of the black power movement. But what did that look like logistically on the ground with the black drug dealers that were your father and Eddie Jackson and their crew?
Well, I think like a couple things that synchronize that is, I remember growing up, there was a big poster of Angela Davis with the Black Power sign and with her afro. This is at our house in Mark Twain, once Pops
In your home.
in our home. Angela Davis representing kind of the Black Power movement of the 70s, an iconic figure, right? But she's being celebrated in the home of one of Detroit's largest drug dealers, my dad, right? When the Detroit Free Press breaks the story, the caption they read is, are they real estate partners or are they drug kingpins?
Because they were both.
Both were true. And that's what the courts were going to have to litigate to figure out, are they really just real estate barons or are they real estate barons and also drug kingpins?
So oddly enough, even though that was 50 years ago, today, I mean, certainly, for example, the Flannery brothers were never treated like, oh, well, you really might be music moguls. We're going to have to litigate this. It was always treated like, oh, you guys are drug dealers. Whereas 50 years ago, it's funny, things go forward, things go back. They weren't treated like that, I mean, until the day they walked in prison.
All respect to the Flannery brothers and the whole BMF family. They were never on my father and Eddie's level. First of all, to be treated with the preference that Eddie and my father were treated with.
They did have a huge real estate portfolio. They paid.
Eddie Jackson paid $500,000 cash to the IRS.
At one time.
At one time.
Tax lien.
1973 money, I assure with
That's like $4 million.
$4 million today money, okay?
And was able to account for it.
And was able to account for it because he had real estate holdings from what's now the Midtown area, throughout Highland Park, throughout the west side of Detroit, Flint.
Along the Ohio Turnpike, we're still trying to figure out, was Eddie probably
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
serving people maybe from down south that would come meet him
Saginaw,
on the Turnpike?
That often it seemed that when his operation really expanded, he would start buying properties in centrally located cities that he could always send a carrier to or himself in one of his own.
Even though your dad was a chief lieutenant, we figured he had some other stuff going on.
He had many deals that he was doing. So when we do the Eddie Jackson count, it's always a low count because nobody knows exactly how many deals he made on his own.
We know he had real estate along the Ohio Turnpike.
That's we do. Yeah, we do. All the way through there. But anyway, Judge Fiken, who was the chief federal judge appointed by Richard Nixon during this era where Richard Nixon, so you got to connect the dots. The judge presiding over the case is Judge John Fikens, who is the chief federal judge who has been appointed by President Richard Nixon, who is heavily attempting to bolster up black business entrepreneurship in America, to use it as a counterweight against the black radical movements represented maybe best by the Black Panthers and even organizations like Milton Henry's Republic of New Africa, right?
Did your parents talk? You said one of their first dates was to go see Huey Newton.
They used to go right there on Linwood to the mosque, and they would see Huey P. Newton, H. Rap Brown. One of my mother's fondest memories was she met Muhammad Ali there on Linwood.
Right after he would have converted.
Right after he converted, and he was speaking. That's what people in the young black couples, working class, lower,
That's a different
did
time,
for a date. Was let's go see what Huey Newton and H. Rap and Stokely Carmichael are talking
and yet
about.
in a couple years period, suddenly you had movies out with posters of, black men in, super fly outfits and guns shooting at white policemen, pimping white women. Now, that was Hollywood imagery to some degree, but some of that stuff was going on. How the hell did it change so rapidly? Do you think it was, to some degree, maybe wasn't created by a plan by the government, but maybe it was amplified.
Well, let's look at it through this window. If you're Judge Fiken, appointed by a president who is actively speaking about giving the black man his share of the American capitalist dream, and now you have these.
Saying that commercial, the black man's pride is the white man's hope.
So, and you have this legitimate black real estate baron who you are accusing of being also a major narcotics trafficker, just for perception. Let's give him the full breath, which means you and your 34-man indicted crew, we're going to give you large bonds, but we already know you have the money. So Eddie bonds
36 people.
Bonds out 36 people, including itself. It would go up
millions of dollars.
It would go up. It would go up regularly as the cases would drag on and drag on. But I mean, I think the best example of being treated like a white collar criminal was after conviction in '74. Vikens tells Eddie via Milton and Henry Roth Black, now that you've been found.
Oh, that was the year. Okay.
74. Now that you've been found.
But this is they're at their peak of selling dope.
Zenith.
Yeah.
This is the zenith.
They made pretty much all their money in Legend while under indictment and convicted.
He says we're going to raise the bond. We're going to keep everybody else's bond, the other 30-some people's bond. We'll keep it $30,000 each.
That's $1 million.
Right there. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Garrett, your bonds will be increased. He increased Eddie's bond, I think, $300,000, and my father and 5-0's bonds to $150,000.
Oh, that's the same bond that Frank Matthews had, $300,000. Oh, so there was
he tells
$1.5 million in bonds out.
He tells
1.7.
Right. He tells them. He says almost jokingly to Eddie, "I'm sure you didn't bring that much with you. I'll give you guys 3 days to get the bond posted. I'm sure that'll be sufficient time."
So he didn't take it. So they're
convicted. They're convicted. He could have very easily said, "Go to jail right now."
Of being kingpins.
Correct.
And no cuffs are put on them.
They walked out. It's all in the newspaper. Eddie walks out, talk about this is a travesty, some racist pig shit. This is just, and it goes wrong, ranting that I'm international, and the judge then told me I can't leave the Tri-County area, and I'm an international man. And they went on about their lives for another 3 years as they litigated the case all the way up to finally being refused to be held to the Supreme Court. And even after the Supreme Court refuses to hear the case, which means that the lower court's convictions are going to be upheld, they give them each another 6 months to get their affairs in order. So my father had 6 months when he knew all their litigation had been, or remedies had been exhausted. He had another 6 months to prepare himself and the family.
He was going all, so he was, everything he was selling in,
was preparing for the family to survive while he was away. The only reason Eddie wasn't still out is because he had violated the terms, and violated the terms of his bond. But you can't imagine now tier 1 black African-American narcotics traffickers,
or any narcotics trafficker,
being granted.
They take your money before you've even been convicted.
And the fact that
they just have to say you're suspected of drug dealer, so you have to prove you're not to get your money back.
Milton Henry we have on tape.
So that's the thing, if you're thinking about selling drugs now, it's a different legal structure. They barely were taking their money even when convicted.
There was no.
Now they take your money. You're at the airport with 30,000. We'll take that. You come to court and prove it's not drug money. You're not charged with a crime. They take your money and you're not even charged with a crime.
Well, to show how the world changed, fast forward 1984, Eddie's Mercedes-Benz 500 SEC, once he gets hot, is forfeited. The same man that never, $1 million real estate portfolio in the 70s was never attacked. The houses in Southfield never attacked.
None of the stuff was taken.
They never lost a dime in forfeiture.
Because that didn't really exist. Well,
forfeitures existed, but
it was hard to prove.
And given the sentences, although they sound large, Eddie 30 years, my father 21 years, they only had to do a third. That the government was not attempting to punish them for being the largest, most sophisticated, according to the government, the most sophisticated narcotics ring in the Midwest of America. they were given, and I think that just has a lot to do. But by the 80s, the Black Power movement is gone, and the need
Better than dead.
the need to bolster and seem to be giving these, because you
So
can,
do you look at it? So you think your idea is that there was some, and of course it would have been talked about in tacit terms, but Nixon, with the federal judges he appointed, with the Justice Department, some idea of like, well, letting the drug dealer culture develop, because it sure does seem like, as I studied this stuff, that period from 68 to 73 is wide open. I mean, did some people get caught and go to prison? Yeah,
but not for very long if they did.
not for very long, and there was money was made. It was we never made again. I
Fact.
mean,
Those guys in
business
Harlem.
got bigger in America, but as far as individuals, that was the age of the true kingpin,
Kingpin.
Mr. Big. I run this town.
The Eddie Jackson, Frank Matthew, Nicky Bond characters.
The biggest drug dealer
One
in
would
New
have
York
to
in
be-
1985
Yeah,
did not have nearly the power that the biggest drug dealer in New York in 1975 had.
Yeah, I think you would have to be naive to not say that the authorities,
Some complex
these
interrelationship.
people run the Treasury Department and have think tanks. Nixon says he wants more small black businesses. No one is naive that many of the Jewish
It requires capital.
many Jewish America's wealth, not all of it, much of the seed
So
money.
people that move from the rural South as sharecroppers and are in big cities,
And you want them to
by
have
the
businesses.
time they are really stowing up in the cities, the jobs are starting to dwindle. Well, still all ism and no capital. Where the capital is going to come from?
The same place where the
Somewhere.
capital came from to build the city of Miami,
Capital has to come from somewhere.
and from a political point. And let's just be real. Yeah, some of them are going to go to jail, and we'll catch them. But if they can fund some black businesses and help create this black middle
Put
class,
money into the economy.
because
The jobs are leaving the central cities. As we know, the president of Hudson's made a speech in 1971 or 2 here in Detroit. Hudson's became Macy's. He said the black man is set to inherit control of the cities, meaning as the whites move to the suburbs, you start to have black mayors and chiefs of police. But I fear he will be left holding an empty bag, which simply meant wasn't all just white flight, it was the cities were old. Listen, in 1972, many of the structures in Detroit were 60 or 70 years old. The roads were old. As cities get older, they're expensive. As the less kids, the schools cost more. So the suburbs they were new, they had less tax burden simply because they were virgin land. So just as you started to have black mayors and politicians, they're inheriting problems. The cities are already old.
yes, and I think the disappointment that the Nixon administration and Ford administration, because that's when this was happening, was under the Nixon and Ford administration, because Carter is the one who cracks down on Nicky Barnes. It's the Carter administration
Yes.
that started these crazy
Draculian sentences.
sentences.
So let me ask you a question.
They thought the blacks would invest the money better than we did.
You know,
They
it
thought-
was the kind of person that was getting it ultimately were criminals, and maybe your family did, but 9 out of 10, a lot of it was.
Right, they were disappointed. I think they would have hoped that 3 out of 10 would have used it, as many other ethnic groups had done.
But
to use
because
this
of
as a-
race, it was much more difficult to be black and say, oh, I want to build a shopping center downtown.
Well, no, but I think we just went by a friend of the family's who was right in the heart of a still African-American community. Part of the game is you get rich and keep your investments in your community. Part of the reason why Eddie Jackson's properties were not attacked, he wasn't buying commercial property in Bloomfield Hills
Or in residential-
You just hit it, Mr.
in
Prophet.
black neighborhoods.
If you buy residential in black neighborhoods, basically stay in your place, you can get a lot of latitude.
And didn't they have a rule of no sell at the
Nope.
spot, no white customers?
Keep your investments and your influence in your
and
community.
even the drug, they weren't
And
really selling to white people.
No, they did. It was actually a prohibition in their crew against selling to white people. And that's also one of the tacit, unspoken rules. Every black African-American drug dealer who I know who has went and invested in suburban or white communities, commercial properties, have always had horrible outcomes.
Really?
Whereas the guy who keeps his after-hour joints and buys 50 houses in the same neighborhood that he operates in some of them end up becoming old men and keeping all
Because
the
not to get into details, but you know or have known, not just your family, because of course birds of a feather flock together. So, of all the highly successful black and other drug dealers from Metro Detroit and some other places, but especially here, you know, damn near all, you got some type of connection.
If you was getting money from 1970 to the year 2000, you are a part of what we called the cartel. Not a black mafia in the structure of the Italian mafia with one godfather, underboss, and capo regimes. But what went on in this town between 1970
and that, would you say also between cities?
And between cities, right? Where the Gambinos are everywhere. Well, there is a cabal or a cartel of many bosses. Eddie Jackson worked with Frank Usher, who will work with Felix Walls, who will work with Leroy Kent.
Here at a cop, and of course you went to New York.
Eddie will deal with Nicky Barnes or Felix.
Because you heard Eddie on the cell phone with
numerous times.
He had a car phone in the 70s.
In the 70s.
What's that called, a satellite phone?
I'm not sure. We just called the phone in the Cadillacs. Pops said he had phones in the Cadillacs.
In the 70s.
In the 70s. Clarence Gale was a big guy out of Chicago. He was the conduit. He's who introduced my father.
And he lived here.
He lived here.
But he had his business in
Chicago. Who tied in that cartel, which gave Detroit access to the Chicago
and
market.
He was planning on leaving Detroit and living in New York, which would have been smart.
That was his plan.
Looking back, the smart thing to do if you're doing something, whatever city you're in, go live somewhere else.
And a man of his wealth and lifestyle just could have blended in so much better. He stuck out like a sore thumb in Detroit in the 70s, and by the 80s,
he really did.
He really stuck out. Because at least in the 70s, there were so many other big fellas. This is a town of big fellas, right? Circa the 70s, right? Just in Southfield, you got 10 tier 1 guys a part of the same cartel.
Yeah.
So I think that's the distinction. The newspapers called the Jackson organization a black mafia.
And so did the DEA, but that's not really.
It was a black drug cartel.
Cartel.
That all.
So the black drug dealers of the 60s, 70s, the heroin people would probably qualify very similar to like the Sinaloa Federation of today.
Correct.
Of people of varying power in different places, some extremely powerful, some more violent than others. No one per se in charge of anyone, but of varying influences who would come together to help each other as needed. Sometimes I got it, sometimes you got it. Hey, we got a corrupt cop over here. Hey, we know a connect over there. But it wasn't like the mafia of, well, this guy's in charge of Detroit and he answers to this guy in New York, and these three get together and decide what happens for the country. Definitely not.
And to coalesce that.
And even with Eddie, he would say, you don't work for me, we get money together.
Correct. In the famous article, The Men Who Sell Heroin, where they list the 8 kingpins of Detroit, or 12, my father Eddie, Lester Ramsey, the LeBlanc guy, Milwaukee Jack, John Clausen, a.k.a. John Claxton. But anyway, Lester Ramsey, who was a big guy who was in that article, but he's the guy who sells Eddie the properties on Oakman in exchange for 3 kilos of China White. Now,
the apartment building.
The apartment building.
Oh, you never told me. That's
right.
Oh, he traded those for.
Chuck,
then they had to do it on paper.
Chuck Goldfar's the bail bondsman for Nicky Bonds and Eddie Jackson. So, much like you said, it's a federation of these guys
it
working
really doesn't
together.
matter what city you're in.
Clarence Gale of Chicago.
So, Nicky Barnes got bailed out from the same Detroit bail bondsman where his dad and Eddie picked up their love of leisure suits.
Exactly.
And big Cazal glasses.
Exactly. Clarence Gale and Nicky Bonds owned property together, found for them by Chuck Goldfar in Pontiac, Michigan.
Oh, that's whenever they talk about Nicky Barnes had a housing development in Michigan. Oh, that was him and a guy from Chicago,
Clarence Gale,
having a deal in Michigan set up by a
Chuck
Detroit Jewish bail bondsman.
That's the cartel, or as you use, the federation.
The federation.
Just very loosely, but yet.
Chuck Goldfarb wasn't,
he's a part of a whole different
edge of criminality. He did go to prison for having a hidden interest in the
Aladdin casinos
with the mafia.
Correct.
Say Goldfarb represents that edge of criminality and had a huge legal business. Bail bonds is legal.
And
But
a huge construction business.
Oh, yeah,
Goldfarb
oh,
Construction Company.
Oh, is
which
that who
built,
is that who constructed the stuff for Gale and Barnes?
Correct.
So the same person that bailed out Nicky Barnes and kept your dad and Eddie and old crew out on bail
Yes.
is the same person who gave Ali fight tickets when Eddie went and met Bardozzi, is the same one whose construction money built the kingpin from Chicago and the kingpin from Harlem's Michigan housing project.
Correct. And to as much credit, we always owe the Goldfars who told my mom and dad, you should start sending your kids out to Cranbrook where I send my kids, because people in our life, kids need to get a good education.
And that's why you know the G in benign asylum.
Facts. And it's also why we got Beyond Street Dreams.
That's right.
That's what we did.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, so anything else? That was dope. Okay, so anything, seeing it like that, we could do a map. In fact, when we get back, I'm gonna have you download a map to show them visually. So a kingdom from Chicago who lives in Detroit partners with Nicky Barnes through their Jewish bail bonds. There was a construction company that built
in Pontiac.
Yeah, you start to understand, like, oh, it ain't about Chicago, Detroit, New York. It's about these 11 people. That's what it's about.
It is a couple.